Well, hello, Embrace. If I haven't had the chance to meet you personally, I'm Holly, and I'm part of the staff team here at Embrace. And if you're joining us at one of our campuses, or maybe you're joining us online or at one of our network churches, we are so glad that you're here worshiping with us today. Now, if you have your Bibles, would you go ahead and open them up to Exodus chapter 16? We're going to jump in just a moment. Now, we're continuing our series, YouTube Fails and Rabbit Trails. And in this series, we've talked a lot about social media. And so I thought it only fair for me to share with you one of my greatest social media fails. Happened about 3 years ago. I was sitting at home innocently scrolling Instagram. Now, I say innocently because at that point in my life, I was completely happy and content. I mean, I didn't have the newest house. I didn't have the nicest house, but I loved my home. I also realized that I'm aging. I'm just going to get older. And so I decided that I'm content with that fact. I'm content with aging gracefully. That was until I stumbled upon this lifestyle blogger. And after checking out a few of her posts, I started to realize that you don't even have to look like you're aging anymore, as long as you're willing to pay enough money. And so I'm looking at her posts. I put two and two together. This girl is my age. She doesn't have a single line on her face. She looks 10 years younger than me. And I start getting mad about that. I'm like, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. I work really hard too. And if you don't have lines, I deserve to not have lines. And so I decided right then and there that I didn't like the lines on my face anymore either, and I was going to do something about it. Well, I decided that I was going to start with my smile lines. I've had a couple of men ask me, what is that? Okay, so that's these lines right here, gentlemen, okay? I decided that those were going to be the first ones I was going to erase. Well, when I looked into it and I realized how much it cost, then I also realized that I couldn't afford it, so I did what every wife and mother does. I went on the hunt for a bargain. I started asking around, and I was told about this excellent injector. Now, gentlemen, injector, that's just the name that they give people who shoot our faces up with paralyzing potions to slow down the aging process, okay? I was told about this excellent injector. Now, my first sign really should have been that she practiced out of her house and not a doctor's office. But I really didn't care because she was half the cost of others. I mean, I was so stinking excited. And so I went into her house, I laid down on her couch, and she started injecting me. All the while, she starts telling me, while she's injecting me, how smart I was to come to her. Because, see, most people put a product in that will only keep your lines away for about 3 months. But her product was going to keep my lines away for 2 years. Shut up. You mean I'm going to look like I'm 25 for 2 years at half the cost? I'm winning. I mean, I was so winning in life right then. And I just couldn't wait for her to finish. She finally did, and she gives me this little handheld mirror, and I take one look in that mirror, and I started sobbing. I mean, sobbing like a toddler who had their popsicle taken away. I mean, it was awful. I sobbed because this is what I look like. I wish I was kidding. I looked like, even my husband will tell you, I looked like the Joker. It was awful, and I realized a little too late that even babies have smile lines. So when you try to take those away, the result is freaky, and I looked freaky. And despite all my crying, she told me there was absolutely nothing she could do, and she just sent my little Joker face on its way. Well, I get in my car, and I call my husband, still sobbing, but I called my husband because I'm like, well, surely Chris will know what to do when I've allowed a bargain injector to shoot my face up with a paralyzing potion that left me looking like Joker, right? Surely he'd know how to fix this. And so I called him, and he says, oh, honey, I'm sure you're just overreacting. I'm sure it's not that bad. Just come meet me at work, and I will assure you that it's not nearly as bad as you think. I was like, you know what? He's probably right. I'm probably just overreacting. It's probably really not that bad. So I drive to his work, my husband meets me outside, and the first thing out of his mouth was this. Oh. Oh, gosh. Okay, you go do whatever you have to do and fix that. Okay, he took an oath to lie to me anytime it comes to my physical appearance. He's supposed to lie to me and tell me what I want to hear. And for the first time in 20 years, he didn't lie to me. And I was, at that point, if I was freaking out before, I was completely freaking out by this point. I hop in my car. I ask Siri for the closest plastic surgeon's office. I mean, surely a plastic surgeon can fix this. And at this point, I'm thinking like Face Off, if you guys remember that movie. Like, can you just like cut my head here, pull my face down, suck that crap out, and sew me back up? I'll be back to work in 2 days. That's what I was thinking was going to happen. So I walk into this plastic surgeon's office. The receptionist takes one look at me and she goes, "Oh, honey." Now, I'm from the South. And so honey is what we call people that we think are stupid. Honey, what have you done? And she immediately escorts me back to an exam room where a doctor meets me within a matter of moments. I'm like, okay, guys, I am breathing. This isn't like I need CPR. But anyways, he meets me. I guess in the world of plastic surgery, this was a major emergency. So he meets me in the room. I am bawling, and I tell him down to the penny how much money my husband and I have to our name. And I promise I will give every single penny of it to you if you can just fix this. Can you fix it, please? When I finally calmed down enough to tell him the name of the product that the lady put in my face, he goes, "Oh, yeah, that's not good. You know, that product went off the market about 2 years ago because we discovered it's like putting cement in your face. And so unfortunately, there's nothing we can do. Your face is just going to have to absorb that over the next 2 years." Okay. How I went from innocently scrolling Instagram to looking like the Joker from Batman for 2 years is beyond me. And if I would have known that was going to happen, I would have thought twice before I started scrolling. But honestly, that wasn't Instagram that caused my face mishap. It was my own discontentment. It was my discontentment with where I'm at, and I'm learning this about discontentment. You see, I'm learning that discontentment is really a tricky thing because sometimes being discontent, it can serve us well, right? I mean, the person on the team that steps up because he knows the team is underperforming, that person is usually rewarded over time. Or like if I see a picture of myself from a few years ago, maybe I need to lose a few pounds right now, and I see a picture of myself, and it reminds me of what I used to look and feel like when I was taking better care of my body. And if that causes me to be discontent with where I'm at today, and that discontentment in turn causes me to put down the bowl of ice cream, turn off Netflix, and hit the gym, that is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. And so I think that's what it is about discontentment. It's the fact that sometimes it can be a really good thing, and other times it can be a really bad thing. That it just starts to feel so harmless when it creeps into our lives. And see, discontentment will do that. It will tiptoe into our souls, and it usually does it through the vehicle of comparison. And it just feels so harmless when you're just innocently comparing. Maybe you notice that your friend's got a great new pair of tennis shoes, and you look down and you notice how grimy yours look, and so you just mentally make a note, tonight I'm going to hop on Amazon and buy some new shoes. Or it feels so harmless when you go to your girlfriend's housewarming party, and you just kind of daydream about what it would be like to own a nice new house, maybe even hop on Pinterest later that evening and research modern farmhouses, just to get a feel. I mean, that's not really a big deal, is it? I mean, is it a big deal? Is being discontent really harmless? Is it really no big deal? See, I don't know if it's because a lot of my friends and loved ones are facing midlife crisis. We're just at that age. But it has been very sobering for me to watch the damage that discontentment can do in our lives if we're not careful. I've seen loved ones that got discontent with their marriage and they just simply traded it in. And honestly, I always thought it was kind of funny when I would watch a sitcom and a guy in his 40s would introduce his buddies to his midlife crisis, and instead of it being a brand new motorcycle or a Corvette, it was a beautiful girl in her 20s. But I'm realizing when that stuff happens in real life, it tears apart hearts and homes. It leaves people feeling like they will never be whole again on this side of heaven. And see, that's what discontentment does. It starts off harmless, but it leads us to a point, to a mental mindset that says that what I have today and who I am today is just simply not enough, that things as they are right now are not good enough. And it's important to understand that discontentment doesn't mean that I'm dissatisfied with everything or that I'm frustrated with everything. It just means that there's always something I'm frustrated with. Doesn't mean I'm frustrated with everything. It just means there's always something I'm frustrated with. And it may be the fact that you think your husband isn't romantic enough. It may be our child is not respectful enough. My friend is not loyal enough. The employee does not work hard enough. But see, discontent takes us to a place that of the imperfect circumstances in our life, and it will start to make us fixate on those. And with that, it flares these feelings of disgust, of anger toward ourselves, towards our circumstances. And discontent, it starts harmless, but it leads to a lot of damage in our lives. And according to the Washington Post, Americans are becoming discontent every year. That's great news, isn't it? It says that we're getting pretty miserable. In fact, the peak of our happiness was reported to be in the 1990s. I think that's rather fascinating because if you think about it, social media didn't exist in the 1990s. And remember, discontentment will creep into our souls through the vehicle of comparison. And social media is to comparison what gasoline is to a fire. It will creep in through that comparison. But we are not the first generation to struggle with discontentment and comparison. I think that's pretty good news to know that other generations have struggled with this. Today we're going to look at the country of Egypt, we're going to look at the nation of Israel. And it's important for us to understand that right before we're going to pick up in the Bible today with this story, it's important for us to know that the nation of Israel had been slaves to the country of Egypt for over 400 years. After which God himself steps in and through a series of supernatural events, okay, not a revolutionary war, but through miraculous events, God frees Israel from Egypt. And so at the point we're going to pick up, Egypt, their enemy, is decimated. I mean, the country lies in ruins, the leaders are dead, and Israel is finally free. And not only are they free, but God has promised that he is going to give them a land, a space for their entire nation to move into, and they can set themselves up as their own independent nation, owned by no one. And Israel is so excited. They're so excited to be free of Egypt. They're so excited about this new land that the entire chapter of Exodus, chapter 15, is a prayer of thanksgiving to God from Israel. And they're just thanking him. They're so thankful for this new land. But what I want us to see is that it doesn't take long for discontentment to set in, to creep into their lives. And we're going to learn from Israel 3 things that discontentment will do if we allow it to go unchecked in our lives. The first thing is found in Exodus chapter 16. If you have your Bibles, pick up with me there. In verse 1, it says this, that the whole community of Israel set out from Elim and journeyed into the wilderness of Sin between Elim and Mount Sinai. They arrived there on the 15th day of the 2nd month, 1 month after leaving the land of Egypt. Only 1 month later, 1 month after that prayer of thanksgiving. There too, the whole community of Israel, they complained about Moses and Aaron, that's their leaders. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate the bread that we wanted. But now you have brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. Man, those dreaded words of if only. If only we were back in Egypt, at least there our tummies were full. Well, maybe that's the one thing that's not perfect in your circumstance today, but are you forgetting all the other things that weren't perfect in your circumstance back then? Are you forgetting the fact that you were slaves, that you were in bondage? Are you forgetting your loved ones who died because they were pushed too hard? Are you forgetting all those beatings? See, when discontentment begins to set in our souls, we start to romanticize the past. If only we still lived in that past town, or if only we had waited a little bit longer before we had children. If only I had married that guy. You know, he was so romantic. He brought me flowers every single week. Maybe he did buy you flowers, but are you forgetting the fact that he was as moody as crap? And he would take his anger out on you. And so those flowers were a constant peace offering, right? If only we lived in that past town. No, I get it. That past town had a Chick-fil-A and Sioux Falls cannot offer you that. I understand. I really do get it. But do you forget the fact that you whined about the taxes and the traffic daily? See, discontentment may be getting a hold of us if we find ourselves romanticizing the past. Discontentment will cause us to do that. The second thing that discontentment does in our lives is found in Exodus chapter 32. Now see, Moses, their leader, he had left Israel for a few days to go spend some time with God, okay? He went to go spend some time alone with God, and this is what happened. When the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. Come on, they said, make us some gods who can lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses. See, they were frustrated with their circumstances. They were impatient. They didn't like where things were at today. And discontentment does that. It causes us to resent our today. And Israel did what many of us do. They don't like where things are at right now, and they want it fixed right now. So instead of choosing the best decision or the right decision, they just try and fix it. And they do a quick fix, and Israel did that. They created these false gods, and the consequence for that introduced so many problems into the nation of Israel. If you continue reading, we don't have time to go into it today, but if you were to continue reading, you would find out that because of those gods they created, that thousands and thousands and thousands of Israelites got sick, and many of them died. And maybe in our own lives, maybe it's not death or sickness even. But don't we kind of do the same thing? Don't we end up sabotaging ourselves because we resent where things are at today? Don't we sometimes try to find a quick fix and it ends up making things a lot worse? Have you ever been in a toxic relationship? And when you got out of that relationship, you were just so thankful to be done with it. I am so glad to have that drama behind me. I am so glad that that is over. Thank you, Jesus, for helping me get out of that relationship. Only 2 weeks, maybe 2 months later, you realize, I don't like to be alone. I don't want to be alone. So instead of getting help and figuring out what that's all about, we just jump right back into another toxic relationship. See, we sabotage ourselves when our discontentment allows us to resent our today, and we chase these quick fixes that aren't a fix at all. Parent, have you ever had, those of you that have teenagers, have you ever wanted your teenager to be more respectful? Like you've decided your teenager could be more respectful, and I want to fix this, and I want to fix this right now. This needs to be handled. And maybe you find yourself so frustrated with your child's lack of eye contact that you fail to recognize how hard they're working in school this year. Maybe you're so angry that they talk underneath their breath. that you can't even pause and take a moment to tell them how proud you are of them for excelling in school. Let me ask you this. What do you think it would do for your child's disrespect if you complimented her on what she is doing right today? You think maybe she might be a little more respectful? The discontentment will cause us to sabotage ourselves and our loved ones because it brings us to a place where we resent our today. The final thing I want us to learn about what discontentment can do in our lives is found in the book of Numbers. So Israel's story continues from the book of Exodus and into the book of Numbers. Okay? And in this, Israel, right at this time, Israel is moving into their promised land, okay? And so God has given them this land, this place that he's going to set them up as a nation. But do you know that we all have a promised land as well? It's not a physical space per se like it was for Israel, but for us, it's our purpose in this life. It's what we were created to do, and even more importantly, it's who we were created to be. And God wants to take us on that journey just like he does Israel. But see, look what happens. Israel goes and sends a few people to scout out this land, to check it out before the whole nation moves into it. And here's what they came back saying. I want you to see this. They came back and they said, we can't go up against them. They're stronger than we are. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we looked like grasshoppers. Their voices rose in great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. If only, they said, we had died in Egypt or even here in the wilderness, they complained. Why is the Lord taking us into this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? Wouldn't it be better for us to go back? The giants are too big. The circumstances are too big for us to overcome. Let's go back. Let's go back to slavery. Let's go back to bondage. Let's turn around and go back. Guys, this is what discontentment does in our lives. It will steal our futures. And if you know this story, you know that Israel complained and they complained until finally God just said, enough. Enough. He was so upset, but you know what? He gave Israel what they wanted. They did not have to face those giants. That generation never had to face those giants. They got what they wanted, but they forfeited their promised land. That generation didn't face the giants, but they also never got in that promised land. They never got to set Israel up as its own nation. They got what they wanted, but they missed what they were created for. They died purposeless. They died wandering. And guys, we can do the same thing in our lives. We can get what we want, but completely miss what we were created for. You see, we live in a culture that tells us that we can make whatever decisions we want to make, however we want to make them, whenever we want to make them, and the end will always end up the way we want it to. That's not true. It doesn't work that way. Discontentment may appease us today, but left unchecked, it will forfeit our future. It will forfeit our promised land. My child is too far gone. The task of parenting him is just too big. Promised land forfeited. I cannot beat this addiction. It's in my genes. I've tried way too hard. Promised land forfeited. There's too much damage done in our marriage, too much hurt. We cannot put this back together. Promised land forfeited. Please hear me. Whether it's the future of our marriages, of our parenting, of our finances, or even just simply our peace of mind, discontentment will steal it all if we allow it to take over our souls. So what do we do? What do we do about this? How do we overcome feeling perpetually dissatisfied in a culture that tells us that we don't have enough and that we're never going to be enough? So how do we overcome that? I want to share with you guys just two simple practices, two things that we can do to overcome feeling perpetually dissatisfied. The first is simply to start practicing gratitude. Instead of fixating on what isn't perfect in our circumstances today, what if we just started asking ourselves, but what is great today? What is great about today? What is my husband excelling at? What part of my body am I proud of? I mean, some of us just really need to exchange our hates for our greats. You know, instead of waking up every morning complaining about all the things that aren't perfect in our lives, what if we woke up every morning and just said, 5 great things about my life today? 5 greats. This morning, my 5 greats were, I'm really excited. I live in Nashville, so I was really excited to travel here and have some nice fall crisp air. I love it. I love that it's getting cool. My other thing is I have a great team that I work with. I get to spend a few days with them. I have a great husband who covers all the bases where I travel doing what I love. I've got a great season of watching 3 kids play basketball starting in just 2 weeks. And I'm going to have myself a great pumpkin spice latte later this afternoon. Those are my 5 greats. And see, they're not grand. They're just life. And social media, it lies to us, guys. Life does not have to be grand to be great. It doesn't have to be perfect to be enjoyed. Why don't we simply exchange our hates for our greats and start practicing gratitude? The second thing that we can do to overcome discontentment in our lives is to simply stop focusing on our giants. You see, when we focus on our giant circumstances, promised lands are forfeited. Purposes are unfulfilled. Dreams are left unchased. Family trees come to a screeching halt. And regret the size of mountains begins to build in our souls. What if Israel, instead of focusing on their giant circumstances, would have focused on their giant God? What if they would have said, that yes, these circumstances are huge, but I serve an even bigger God, a God who freed us from Egypt without a war, a God who created a road right through the Red Sea, a God who used a cloud to be MapQuest before smartphones ever existed, a God that essentially fed us Chick-fil-A from the sky. That's my God. And what if they would have focused on how giant their God was instead of their circumstances? They could have looked at their children and they could have said, yes, we were scared to death. Yes, we didn't sleep for days. But we kept advancing and we kept moving forward because we knew that our God was bigger than our circumstances. What if we could look at our children and we could say the same thing? That this family structure, that this home, that these traditions, that this church exists. Because although we were scared to death, although our circumstances were imperfect, and although they were giant at times, we kept moving forward. We stopped focusing on that and we kept moving forward. Your mom and I, we battled back from a really dark place in our marriage or I overcame being a single mom and I went back to college and I supported you, or I started the business even though I was scared to death. What if we stopped focusing on our giants? I'm going to show you guys one thing real quick before we close. How many of you have a smartphone that has portrait mode on it? Anybody have a smartphone with portrait mode in the camera? Okay, so I've had that for I think I've had this phone for about 1.5 years. And I just realized I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know that I even had it. Somebody showed it to me and I'm freaking out. I mean, it is the coolest thing ever. It is so cool. It makes the worst of photographers look professional. Okay? Like every picture comes out looking professional. And I'm actually going to show you one. I brought a side by side. Okay, so this is my normal camera, and this is on portrait mode. Okay? That's crazy. That's crazy. This is how 90% of my pictures look until I realized I had portrait mode on my phone. I had no idea they could look this good. But see, here's what I'm learning about portrait mode. So when you're in that mode on your camera, it will force you to pick a subject. So I couldn't look at my daughter and say, oh, you look cute tonight, and the sunset's beautiful, and there's some sunflowers in the background, and the hay bales are gorgeous. I want to get a picture and capture it all. No, see, when you're in portrait mode, you have to pick a subject. You have to pick one subject to focus on. And you got to let all the rest fade into the background. All the rest have to fade away. The camera won't even let you take the picture until you do that. In fact, it will tell you, choose subject, place subject within 8 feet. If you're not in the right position, it'll say, move closer. It is literally meant for dummies. And it will make sure that you are focused in on one subject and you are close enough to that subject that everything else can be drowned out and it can take that picture for you before it'll ever snap the pic. It's incredible. It's incredible, but here's what I'm realizing. Here's the problem with our lives. Many of us are choosing to focus on all of our imperfect circumstances. We're choosing to focus on all of that. And honestly, there are just simply too many. The money that's not there, the disobedient toddler, the crappy car you drive, the promotion you just can't seem to get. Even if you get one of those giant circumstances down, there's dozens more to go. No wonder life is so perpetually dissatisfying. No wonder we are discontent. Because we were never meant to focus on our giant circumstances. We were never meant to focus on all these things. We were meant to pick a subject. We were meant to pick a focus, and we were meant to focus on Jesus. He was meant to be our focus. That's what Paul, one of the greatest contributors to the Bible, tells us he did. He said, I had to learn how to be content too. You're not the first person to have to learn this. You're not the first generation to have to learn how to be content. He learned it. And let's look at what he said. He learned in this. He says, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or with little. Here's his secret. Here's what he said. For I can do everything through Christ. Through Christ who gives me strength. Through Christ. Christ was on the other side of his lens. Christ was his subject. Christ was his focus. See, when Jesus becomes our focus, we can live satisfied in imperfect circumstances, whether with plenty or with little. When we focus on Jesus, when we lock in on Jesus, and my eyes are glued to him, and I'm following him, you know what? All these imperfect circumstances, they just become peripheral. I'm locked in, I am focused, and these circumstances, they're going to ebb and flow. They're going to have good days and bad days. There's going to be rough waters out there, and there's going to be great days. But guess what? No matter how bad it gets out there, no matter how rough it is out there, my soul can stay steady. My soul can stay satisfied. It doesn't have to ride the waves of this messy life. It can stay satisfied and it can stay steady when I stay locked into Jesus. And that's because I know that Jesus has fought these giants before. I'm afraid of the disability my child is facing, but Jesus is not. I'm afraid of the marriage that's ending, but Jesus is not. He's not afraid of the money running out. I keep my eyes on him, and my soul can stay steady in imperfect circumstances. You see, we can live satisfied in imperfect circumstances when our circumstances are not our focus, but Jesus is. With plenty or with little, with perfect or with imperfect. You can age gracefully, or you can purchase a top-of-the-line injector. Doesn't matter. You can wear grimy tennis shoes, or you can wear Jimmy Choos. Is that how you say it? Jimmy Choos for crying. Obviously, I don't have fair. For crying out loud, right? You can have the model home or you can have the old house. It doesn't really matter. When you're locked in on Jesus and you stay focused on him with plenty or with little, you can be satisfied, and the goal is satisfied, not perfection. And if we're going to do that, the focus must be Jesus, not circumstances. And maybe you're here today and you just simply need to pick Jesus again. Put him back as the focus of your life. Choose him. You haven't lost your faith. You haven't lost your salvation. You haven't lost your promises. You just simply lost your focus. The good news is Jesus is always ready for you. He's always right there. Simply choose him. Move closer to him. And let's live satisfied in a culture that tells us it's impossible. It's possible. Pick your subject, lean into him, and let's live satisfied. Can I pray for you? Jesus, I just want to confess that there's so many days that we've just lost our focus, that I've lost you as the subject of my life, and I allow the circumstances to overwhelm me. I allow the imperfect things in my life to get me frustrated, to get me angry, to get me discouraged. And Jesus, thank you for teaching us that that was never the point, that we were never meant to focus on those, that we were meant to focus on you. And you can overcome all of that. And you can handle all of that. And your shoulders are big enough for all of that. So Jesus, today we simply choose you. We simply pick you again. Would you come and calm our souls? Help us learn to live satisfied in this culture. Help us to be content, children of God. We love you. We praise you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.